Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Welcome to another episode. I'm recording this on Guyamaigal and Garigal country in March 2026 in the lead up to International Women's Day. Now, International Women's Day this year carries the theme, Balance the Scales. And I've been thinking a lot about what that actually means. Because while systems absolutely need redesigning, there's also another layer to this conversation, one that sits much closer to home. I've been noticing something in my own work and conversations with leaders. Conversations with women leaders specifically, and I have noticed some very senior women, directors, heads of brand, leaders across national footprints, hesitating to ask for investment in their own development. They've been quietly paying out of pocket, minimising their ask before they've even made it. And it makes me wonder, if we don't believe we're worth the investment, how do the scales ever shift? My guest today is someone who has spent her career helping leaders bridge the gap between knowing and asking. Sam Trattles is the founder and CEO of Other Side, a strategic negotiator with experience across more than $575 million in high-stakes negotiations. She's the author of I Love Negotiating and Negotiate Your Worth, and the creator of a uniquely Australian methodology called The Power to Ask. But this conversation isn't about becoming aggressive or combative. It's about conviction. It's about craft. It's about courage. And it's about something many of us were taught very young, to be seen and not heard. In this episode, we explore the long shadow of the good girl conditioning, the real cost of not asking, and how negotiation in the boardroom, at home, and in life is not about conflict. It's about clarity. If we want to balance the scales, perhaps it begins with valuing ourselves, not as an act of ego, but as an act of leadership. Here's my conversation with Sam Trattles. Sam, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yes, me too. Now, you know the first question, and I'd love your take on it. When you think about business, or you might narrow it down to purpose in business, do you think there is a role for love?
100%. I really genuinely, that's what we bonded over when we first met, that I love that concept. I think being a commercial lead, it's really easy for me to just be commercial. But what makes me enjoy what I do is the fact that you can be commercial and you can do that with purpose. So having the balance of both, I think that's what more of us need to look at in terms of why am I going to work? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because surely it has a bigger power, which is where the love and the joy comes from.
Love and money. Yep. Profit and purpose. Yes, we're on the same page. So I'd love you to give our listeners some context. Let's get into the origins of what you're doing today with Other Side. So can you share your backstory and some of the key moments that brings you to the work you're doing today?
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. So to talk about where I am, I have to go way back to the beginning. And so when I was a young girl, well, I think pretty much for half my life, I was terrified of asking for anything. And, I was that little girl who, when the words that I hated most was, we're having a barbecue this weekend. And I'll be like, oh my God, that means I have to carry the chip and dip bowl.
Yeah, you're going to tell the chip and dip story.
And so it was really terrifying standing there and having, people look at me and ask me questions, and then I felt like I needed to ask them questions back. But I am very thankful to my parents for having the barbecues, because obviously that taught me how to start asking. But it was so terrifying. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people my age, growing up in that seen and not heard generation, but then being asked to be seen and to be heard was just so shocking. And then you then go through this phase where you're going to places and you're being told to be a good girl. And then when you come back, was she a good girl? So you're being reported on. And then I go into the good girl house as an adult in my jobs and was constantly being marked against an expectation. But I didn't have to meet that expectation. I had to exceed that expectation. And then I may be valued, but only if I'm really good and if I'm very lucky. So you spend this time of your life trying to work out, well, hang on a minute. How am I asking for what I'm worth when I'm not sure that you value me because I need to exceed your expectations or even do better than that? But there's only one person who does better than that. So there's all these layers and layers and layers of terror about asking, and they're just things about my worth. And then, asking about my opinion matters and my knowledge matters and all those extra things that are really kind of more important than the commercial aspect that really cut deep inside. So when I left my corporate career, I'd had such an incredible life across Australia and across Europe, spending lots of people's money on negotiating for sponsorship deals. So, brilliant, awesome big deals, hundreds of millions of dollars that I was entrusted in, but I still had my little saboteurs on my shoulder. And so, my little inner critic and my people pleaser and my workhorse started when I started my own business about a decade ago. I was like, oh, I've seen you. She's familiar. And so I had to stop and make a decision about, well, what is the power to ask? What is my ability to be valued and to share this with other people in ways that work for them? So that sent me down a very different rabbit warren about how do we ask? And that's really what my business is all about, is about how do you ask in a way that works for you, and also taking into account all of the questions that we need to ask of ourselves for the voices and then those around us. So starting from the inside out. And so for me, that's made a massive difference. I do love what I do, and I do see the experience of transforming someone from going, no, I don't like negotiating, I hate it. And it's like, that's okay. Let's talk about what it costs you not to ask. And there's a lot more than money that it costs you. So, getting to the place where people can feel comfortable that they say, oh, I'm just going to go and have a conversation and find out more information about what I know now so that I can then make a decision. So yeah, sort of how I got down this road. And really looking forward to the evolution of where we take the business from here.
I love that you've gone straight into your passion area, right? And I love that you've done that. And I'm tempted to keep rolling with it, but I'm actually going to pause us and take you back just for a moment, just very quickly, because I mean, I know you, I know, some of your history, but I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and my God, you've had like a really powerful career. And you I know looking at some of the things you've done, your expertise in negotiation is huge. So can you just sort of touch a little bit just on the career side and what you've been doing so our listeners understand what experience you're bringing to this conversation?
Yes, thank you. I don't often brag about it, but it's been a wonderful career. I'm very, very gracious and grateful for the opportunities that I was given. I basically loved marketing, went straight into that, and had a career focus of just say yes, see what happens. So it was not by design. And that took me to some wonderful places. And I think where I really transformed into the sponsorship world was when I was living in London and I was working in banking. And I guess you're pretty much negotiating every day with the bankers and their egos, and lots of learning there. But someone asked me would I like to work on the global partnership for the rugby sevens in Hong Kong, and I was like, yes, because I love sport and I love marketing. So that was a really big turning point for me. And then seeing how all that world evolves and falls out. So when I came back to Australia, worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which really taught me about rigor. Don't spend $1 without making 6 or 8 or more. And then working on some incredible deals. So B2B side had been my focus of my career, and incredible partnerships in that world was Forbes Global CEO Conference was an incredible experience for me. And how do you how do you commercialize something when it's a closed door? It's not like you can put a sticker on the grass at the NRL or something like that, which is where my life then went to. So the rigor that I learned through banking and professional services, and then going to B2C land and being ultimately the head of sponsorship for Telstra, I was just like, wow, this is different. My budget was massive, but you also needed to, how do you work that budget to turn it into something extra? And the privilege I had was in those last two roles was sitting next to the head of the foundation in both companies. And that's when my love and money journey really escalated, was like, yeah, you can do stuff to make, sell more phones or, sell more professional services, but what's the good stuff? And so that's where I really got an appreciation for it. So, anything from grassroots to elite sport, arts and charity land. And then was the through line in terms of the love and money component.
I love, and you've kind of given me the bridge to this, your philosophy that I know this is central to you from conversations we've had, and it's up on your website. And you say it's simple. When people know how to ask clearly and calmly, they have the power to affect real change. And so I want to go back to what you were talking about before, and the good girl, that I'm sure there are many listeners, particularly of the older generation, who, were told be seen and not heard. There were all these expectations, as you talked about, to be the good girl. And we do carry that with us. I think it's baggage that, from conversations you and I have had, you need to constantly be conscious of and be trying to remove, because it really seeps in.
Absolutely.
When did you become aware of it in your professional life? And, when did you become aware of the cost of carrying that baggage?
It's a really good question. I think it happened organically, unfortunately. I think it's more intentional now. Any of the people that I mentor, I very much encourage them to have a look at, does that good girl, good boy live within you, and the saboteurs? Because we need to face these things and go, hang on, is that serving me? And how do I shift my thinking around it? So for me, I think I just had a boss who said, why don't you speak up when you know?
Was that a female or a male boss?
It was actually a male.
Yeah, great.
And I was very grateful to him for that, because he knew that I knew the answer, because I'd sit there in our debrief and say, well, we should have done this, that, and the other. And he's like, okay, well, we would have if you'd said something. And so that was really the beginning of him really mentoring me into, how do you look around the room? What are the signs that you're looking for that you are entitled to speak up? And when we're in a world where, intergenerational conversation is very challenging, we have older people who are terrified of younger people and don't know how to communicate with them. And it is not an island, it's going both ways across those. So we need more than ever, with the overview lens of AI being put in place. If we don't start communicating well and having healthy debate and healthy discussion and saying what we want and believe and asking for those things, where will we be in 2 years' time? And we're going to be behind the cyborg.
And that's the societal cost, right?
Correct.
What about the personal cost? What's the long-term personal cost, financially, psychologically, of not asking for what you should be asking for, not valuing yourself?
Yeah, we need to think about what are the things that we want. So, all those questions that are, or thoughts that are sitting there and you're like, I should say that, blah, blah, blah. So, need to look at it, what I want, need, and deserve, and then put that into the context of what am I asking for or not asking for in the workplace, in a meeting, with a colleague, with my friend, with my partner, with my children. So encourage the listeners to go through the next week and go, okay, where is my opinion matter? Where is it that I'm not asking for those things? And then look at those costs. So if you look financially, of course, if I'm not asking for an increase in my remuneration, then that's going to set me back. What does that cost me? That the next cost is time. So me doing such an awesome job at work to try and achieve. If I do a 360 review at work, people are like, she's a rock star. We love her. She's so valuable. And they say things like, we don't know what we'd do without her. Then if you did that 360 review at home, would they give you the same review? So the cost is that you've got kids at home that all they see you is in your power suit on your phone. So that's a pretty big cost. And then generally harmony. So if you don't have a conversation with your sister about what are we doing for Christmas this year, and she just assumes, then the cost is your happiness and your relationship with your sister. I may be using my sister in this situation. I love her, but there are certain things. She's not a communicator. So we have spent many, many years trying to work out how do we communicate. So I want a great relationship with my sister. So we have to put that effort in. And it does cause us to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's what being a grown-up's all about. We have to suck it up and just go, I don't really want to have this conversation, but what's the cost of not having it? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, it's worth it.
Yeah, isn't it interesting, that whole discomfort thing that we so often run away from, and yet when we lean into that discomfort, that's where we grow.
Yeah. Well, if you think about all of the times when you haven't asked, or somebody who you don't feel like you can always rely on them. I have one brother who I love to pieces, but when it gets awkward, he'll be like, whoa, okay. That'll just go away. Now, what's the impact of that? The impact is that realistically, do I genuinely believe that he'll be there when my back's against the wall? Do I really want this guy to be the leader of our generation in our family? And, these are the questions, these are the points that no one really raises, but it's the truth that I have a little bit of doubt there. And that's a problem. If he knew that was what his reputation of not asking is causing, I don't think he'd ever do that again.
Yeah, really interesting. Now, I know with your business, you work with women, you work with men, you work with leaders, but you have generously agreed to really focus this interview on women. I mean, it's a run-up to International Women's Day in March 2026. So I want to ask, we've talked about the good girl that I think a lot of women can relate to. What are the other myths that keep women silent? What are some of the other myths that they're telling themselves that keep them silent, do you think?
Well, I think all of the things that stops us from asking are very generous, very kind, and very thoughtful. The problem is that we are last. So if you are not asking and you're sitting at the dining room table talking about it, if you're going to a barbecue and you're talking about it, if you're going to the wine bar with your bestie, like some of us do, and talking about it. So if you're wondering what are the things that you're not asking for, think about those three places and where are you putting your energy right now? And what are those conversations that have taken place year on year and year on year? I remember many years ago when I was still in a job, went on holidays with one of my really close friends, and every year we would have this same conversation about, well, where are you with, your job? And it's like, oh, well, I think I need to be promoted to blah, blah's job and I'm ready and I'm this and I'm that. Anyway, one year on this holiday, we would have that conversation every year. And then this one particular year, she said, I'm so bored. And I was like, oh, excuse me. And she said, do you know how many years you have told me that? And I said, no, I don't. She said, it's 4 years. I can tell you when I first asked you, we were at the barbecue, we were doing this, we were doing that. And I was just like, wow. And I was like, for saying that. But I was so grateful because I really had no idea that had been going on for 4 years. And so then, obviously, as a good friend, I turned around the mirror and said to her, oh, well, what about you? So I think what we need to be doing is, as girlfriends and best friends, we need to be asking each other the questions and highlighting to each other, oh, do you know how many times we've had this conversation about your blah, 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 boss, sister, brother, whatever it is. And then going, how do I change my relationship with my girlfriend that's not just about, yeah, you got this. It's like, oh, what do you need to be able to make a change? change? What help can I give you to help you to ask for that thing that you want, need, or deserve? And I think that's really one of the circuit breakers, is don't just be a nice friend and supportive friend. Be a bloody good friend and challenge them and say, right, what are we going to do to change this? And are you ready?
And if you don't ask, you don't get. I think a lot of, I know I've suffered from this in the past, where you think, well, if I just keep showing up and doing, whether it's a good job or being a good friend or whatever, that they'll recognize the value and things will happen as a result.
Yeah.
But
and since when has that actually happened?
Doesn't. Rarely does it.
Well, I thought about this earlier, and the thing is, I think if you're indispensable, or if you're doing an excellent job in that role, taking care of everybody, why would I, as your leader, want you to change roles? Why would I want you to move on? Because then I lose my workhorse. So have a think about the impact and what it's costing you to be indispensable and do such a bloody good job, while at the same time knowing I am ready for something else.
Yeah, I love that. I want you to touch on, you shared the chip and dip story, but I want you to touch on that video that you made, which is the joy of asking, because that kind of reframes asking away from leading into discomfort to actually a positive thing. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, I'm doing this writing course at the moment, so it's very strange. I'm being pushed into very different aspects. And one of the challenges was, where's the joy in asking? And I was like, oh, I don't know. But I think if everybody asked themselves, where is the joy? Most people would say, when it's done. The fact that I've, all this tension, all this stress, and then I go and have the conversation and it's just sort of happened and it didn't really go the way that I thought it might go, and then I walked out of the room and I was like, oh, it's over.
Oh boy, I bet a lot of people can relate to that.
That is the current joy. Now, what we want to do is go, hang on, and this is what I spent years doing, is how do I change that and put the joy at the beginning of the experience? So, with the fear part of our brain is the same as the excitement part of our brain and can easily get confused. So if you have an ask coming up, how do you change your approach to it? So where is there joy in my setup for that ask? And I think that is in preparation. That's such a big part of it, but also in, I'm going into this, my thought process when I go into this, I'm going to find out more information than I have right now. So there is the joy right there, because I'm like, all I'm doing is having a conversation to find out more information. And guess what? I don't have to decide right away. I just want to know A, B, and C. So just starting to think about, well, how does my approach change the way I feel about going and having this conversation?
Yes, it's not a demand. It's a seeking more information, in the process planting the seed in someone else's mind.
Yeah, because if I go into it going, well, often what will happen when if I'm a joy at the relief end, joy and relief, I would be going into that room going, okay, this is what I want. Or I go in and I don't say anything and then I get negotiated with and it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds okay. When inside you're like, no, that sounds really rubbish and it's not fair and I don't deserve that and blah, 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 blah. So we want to just have these thoughts that at the beforehand so that I can get in there and be articulate. And that's what we want to be doing. It's what we deserve to be able to do. And that's fun. It's fun for me. So I just think, I don't expect people to just change from one day to the next. It's like growing a tree. It doesn't happen overnight. But if I change a little piece at every time I go and ask for something, and starting with that, okay, what could be fun about this? What could be playful about the way I ask a question? So I'm cheeky as. So, I often will ask a question I know the answer to, but I'll ask it in a way that makes people laugh or sit back or giggle a little bit so that I can change the atmosphere. And so that's where I'm looking for the joy in the conversation as well, because yes, they are important conversations, which is why they are terrifying, but we need to break it down. We very rarely solve things in one conversation. So let's slow it down. Let's actually find out how do we, like talking to each other and finding out more about stuff, and then getting to the place where we can decide whether we stay together, leave, do this thing or not do this thing.
Before we dive back in, a quick word from me. If you're enjoying this conversation, you might want to know that I work with leaders and organisations on how purpose becomes a powerful driver of trust, performance and resilience. I speak at leadership conferences and company events about how purpose shows up where it matters most, in leadership, in culture and in strategy, helping organisations grow with clarity and confidence in a changing world. You can find out more at my website, carolynbutlermadden.com. Now, back to the episode. I love that you invite, like, you can bring playfulness into it. It's just a whole different energy that you normally think than the energy you normally think about. Now, I know, when we first met and started talking and I saw you as a negotiation expert, I just immediately thought of it in terms of work and partnerships and in the commercial lens. But, you really widened my eyes when you said, we negotiate every day. We negotiate with our kids, with our spouse, with our family, with our neighbours, it's such a everyday skill. So actually leaning into learning how to do it well and effectively is so important. But again, I want to shift it back to women for this. And, this year's International Women's Day theme, 2026, is Balance the Scales. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Can the scales shift if women don't ask?
Oh, it's happening, but it's happening slowly. So, I sort of think, why wouldn't we want to ask? We know it. We know what we want to ask. That is the number one truth that I get from every client. I know what I want. I just don't know how to do it so that I don't blow up the relationship, look like I'm rocking the boat, being seen as pushy, bolshy, blah, 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 all these really, heavy associations with it. So I think if we can get over the hurdle of how to ask, then we can push this thing, we can balance those bloody scales and tip it the other way at some point soon.
Damn right. So tell us about the power to ask, the methodology behind what you do.
So my experience in balancing the scales, I have one question that I ask every International Women's Day is, ask your boss, do I earn the same as the person who sits there doing the same job who may be a male?
Yes.
And you will see from their reaction, you do not need them to answer the question to know the answer. And so I went through this experience in my corporate career, and I asked my boss every year for 3 years, and every year I got the same face. And then what it turned into was this conversation about, what are we going to do about it? It's not now your problem as my boss, but it is now your problem as my boss, and what are we going to do about that? So I think that's one of the conversations that needs to take place to balance the scales. And then I also needed to talk to the person who was doing the same job as me, getting paid more than me, and say, well, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? And he was like, well, I'm really uncomfortable. And I said, okay, great. What are we going to do about that? So
Love that.
The laws have changed. We can all talk about what's in our salary now. And so we should start doing it. Everybody who ever worked for me, I said to them all, everybody at this level, you can all talk to each other about whatever you're earning, because it's all the same. You guys at this level can all talk to each other because it is the same, because you're doing the same job. So I really encourage people to have conversations around the value that they bring and why is there a disparity.
I love that story, and I love how you position it as, what are we going to do about it? It just changes the whole energy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're in a partnership. I worked with that person for years and years, and we had time to make a change. But if I'd said to him, well, that's outrageous, which I probably did in the first year, I'm like, that's outrageous. And it is outrageous. But if I say to him, well, what are you going to do about that? Then he's against the wall and he doesn't know. All he knows is, oh my God, I need to fix this, but I don't know what to do about that. Whereas now we're in the we zone, and then that sounds awkward. Then it's about us working together.
You're such a child.
I am. I love it.
Me too.
So now it's about, do we put together a business case? Do we actually do a side-by-side? Blah, blah, blah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So tell us about the 3 C's, because I guess that's where it starts with.
Correct. So the power to ask, which has been my absolute privilege to recreate after a decade of running my business. So I was like, right, okay, I would love to be in a position where we understand what are the big buckets of things I need to be able to not master, but get more comfortable with to be able to have this power to ask. So the first one is around conviction. So do I have the conviction that what I'm asking for is fair and reasonable? Do I think it's worth the effort to prepare for that conversation? So sitting in that space around belief and faith and whatnot, once you start to unpack it, most of the time people are like, yeah, I'm bloody worth it. It's back to that whole, yes, I know what I want. So really leaning hard. The reason we need to have strength in our conviction is because when someone comes and pushes it, if we're not sure, there's only one way for us to go. So starting with that belief in what you're asking for and that conviction to say, yeah, this is worth the effort. And then when we go from there, then it's about going, well, what helps me to harness that conviction? And that is that negotiating is a learned skill. It is a craft, which is the second C. And nobody taught me that. I didn't really have an education. Mine was about learning on the job. But this is why I do what I do, because it's like, well, no, hang on. I don't need to have all the stress. I can have some stress, but that craft and unpacking, okay, how do I prepare for this conversation? What perspectives do I need to lean on? What research do I need to go and do so that I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm in the position that I'm dead set on my conviction. I have the craft and how I'm going to land my message, and now I have the courage to go and have the conversation. And then I'm not going to endure it. It's an experience that I'm going to go and educate myself that I can make a decision. And then when we look for those lessons every time and keep going back through that 3 C's process, in time you will see yourself as a negotiator with the power to ask.
Love it. Love it. Love it. It's so simple, but it makes so much sense. And, you know, when you start with conviction, I guess you think about if I don't believe, so when pushback comes and if I cave, it's the question, if I don't believe that I'm worth investment, how is anyone else going to believe it?
Yeah. And it is about hearing yourself say it louder and louder and louder. When I'm asking clients, you know, do you think that that's fair? Like, would someone come up to you and say, if someone came and said to you, I want this, Carolyn, can I have that? My question back to them is, if they asked you, would you be offended?
No.
Most of the time, no, that's correct. But we think that what we're asking in any way, shape or form, is like, oh, that's awkward. And it's like, where did this truth come from? So going back to where the evidence points to the reality versus perception is super important. So, you know, the voices inside our heads that say, don't ask for that, you'll look like you're being difficult. It's like, okay, am I? And I have been called difficult. You know, I've had many nicknames in my career, not all of them flattering, but am I being difficult is an interesting one. No, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm actually trying to be really clear and to understand. So I'm sorry if I'm coming across as really clear. That's just my personality. So let's talk about, you know, I'll ask the question in a different way. So, you know, I've got to play to what my strengths are and my edges, and knowing myself is really a big part of this as well. So I know I can be too direct. So there's certain circumstances where I can be. There's other times when I have to go, hang on a minute, how do they hear it best? And change it.
It's so interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking back to my own experience when I had my creative marketing agency. And towards the end of it, I remember there's so much fear, right? Even from young people. Because, and I think particularly with young people, because they're entering a world when they come into the workplace where there are all these structures and hierarchies and different rules and things, and they don't know what they don't know. So they walk with trepidation and there's fear. And it just made me think, I remember when I was running the agency and I heard someone talk, nobody directly asked me, but I heard that there was discussion about salary levels and questions about whether they were being paid, you know, what they should have been paid. I had a team of like 8 people and there were a few of them there. And nobody directly asked me. I just kind of heard. I can't even remember how I heard, but I picked it up. And it's such a shame that nobody asked me. But anyway, I ended up going back and saying, listen, I've heard this is happening. I knew that I'd benchmarked their salary. I'd done research, so I knew where I stood. And I said, look, I want each of you to go and do your own research, you know, and think and find out what the market is paying and what you think you're worth. And then I'm going to sit down with each and every one of you and we're going to have a conversation. You're going to tell me. Right? And it was so interesting that I'm not a scary person, I don't think. But there was, you could see there was like fear in going through that process. And ultimately, I did sit down with each and every one of them, and every single one of them said, we've done the research and you're right. You're paying pretty much the benchmark, maybe a little bit over. And then they said, some of them said, but there are big agencies out there who are swinging some big carrots. We love working here, but those big carrots are, and I guess what I'm sharing is what it can unlock. So what it unlocked in that case is I was going through an experimental phase as a leader, and instead of giving them the answer, what do we do about it, right? I actually said, well, what do we do about it? You know, you recognise we're a small business, so, you know, we can't compete with those big agencies. So what do we do about it? And I gave them that challenge, and they came back collectively and said, if not money, then what about time? And we ended up doing this thing, the agency was called Sunday Lunch, and we did second Sundays where they got an extra day every month that they could. Anyway, what happened doesn't matter, but what happened was innovation as a result of that, and a very different way of solving the problem than I would have thought of myself.
Well, you did think of it yourself. So it's really brave of you to hear a whisper and then action that. Because a lot of leaders will hear a whisper and go, they're talking about salary. I don't know what to do about that. And it would be just easier to go away. So a lot of the fear when you go in, when I had a job and people would say to me, Sam, I want to talk to you about my salary. And I'd be like, well, I was thinking about asking for a pay rise this year. So you asking me that makes it a little bit difficult, doesn't it? That's pretty much the first thing that most managers do. As a business owner, you have a very different thought process. It's like, oh my God, am I going to lose this person? What can we do about it? Blah, blah, blah. So you've done exactly what I would recommend, is to say to people, okay, well, write me a business case for why you should change your roles. And a lot of businesses say, why would I take my teams through negotiation training? They're all going to ask for a pay rise. And it's like, dead straight, they're all going to ask you for a pay rise because they should, but only if they deserve one. So, you know, that thought that I deserve a pay rise, and the understanding that what is a pay rise about? This is about what's changed. I have a bigger budget. I am responsible for more clients. I have more workload, blah, blah, blah. Here's my job description versus what I actually do. So me saying I want a pay rise because the cost of living's high, that is not a reason to have a pay rise. So actually getting someone to do their own job description, business case, and going through that process, and then saying, well, the reality is there's only this much in the middle. And so what are the other levers? As you say, you know, training, working on specific clients, mentorship, a day off, blah, 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 blah. What are all these other creative ways that I can make you happy, because money does not drive everybody. So what are the things that are important to every individual person here? And then we build a process and package around them.
And it's interesting because it goes back to conviction, doesn't it? If you're the asker, because as you say, if you just feel like you're being underpaid or whatever the negotiation is, we're talking about salary here as an example. But if you just have a feeling and you haven't done the research to understand, the market, the context of where the organisation is, like if you don't do any of that, then that conviction might be false conviction.
Correct. And, if I would like a different business unit to deliver on something that they said they were going to, then I need to know, well, what have we done our stuff on our side of the fence and what's happening on that side? So it's just really, we want to be changing the ask. We want to change the questions we're asking of each other. What's going on over there that I don't understand? And then what's going to make us not be siloed and protective. It's very challenging in Australia versus working in any other market, because we are a small market and there's only so many levels above and whatnot. So, the team that are in the middle of the business have got so much to gain from working well together. But yes, how do we communicate with one another to understand that? We used to play, I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back. And my team were always manic. We had AFL, NRL and Bathurst, we had AFL, NRL Grand Finals and Bathurst all in the same period of time. And then that's on the back of a whole season. So, we needed help from other parts of the business. So I would go around and say, right, your team's not busy at the moment, is that right? Can we borrow some of you? And then we'll give them back later on when we've recovered. And so that's types of things. So, how you're using your relationships to get outcomes. That's not about budget. That's not about money. That's about having really strong relationships and an understanding that we need help and we're not too shy to say it.
And curiosity, I guess, is a big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how can we do? How might we? Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting, all of this. The courage piece. What are we actually afraid of?
Well, of what might happen. So I think that's where we're at the point where what is the outcome of every ask? And I think it boils down to yes, no, maybe. And so what we're afraid of is, well, what if they say yes, no, maybe? So we need to start to think about exactly that. What's happened in the past that's made me terrified, scared, hesitant to ask? Is it something's happened with that particular person? Or am I carrying some baggage from something else? So it may have been that person reacted in a way. And so then we need to create a strategy for that particular person. But if it's general things that I'm bringing with me, then we need to just let some of that go and think about, well, when we were back in that preparation phase in the craft, then how did I prepare for how this might go? And then we're not on the hop. So, we're not dancing. The worst thing I see is I'm someone who I'm happy to think on my feet, but I don't do that in a negotiation because I don't want to be thinking and listening and talking at the same time. I actually want to know, okay, this is my talking points. This is what I'm leaning on all the time. And then that gives me the ability to be creative and to listen and enjoy the experience because I'm not trying to think, oh, what are they saying to me and what are my responses and what will I say next? So I'm doing myself a favor by going into it going, okay, well, I've thought about how this might go and then let's just see how it plays out.
So is that, going back to the craft, is that one of the things that people get wrong? Like, they haven't got their talking points, they're listening and thinking about their response at the same time and get lost in that?
Yeah, I think you take it to a child. If a child comes to you and asks you, I would like a new PlayStation. And then, well, what are you going to say to them? You say, yeah, sure, no worries. A lot of kids, I love seeing this at the moment. A lot of kids are doing PowerPoint presentations as to why they should have a new gaming console.
Oh, really?
Or whatever. Because what are we asking them to do? We're asking them to explain to us why you need this, why you deserve it, what impact will it have by you having that. So it's storytelling. Going back to the old tradition, don't just come in here and make it my problem. Come in here and tell me a story about what it will make a difference if you had more money, more people, more time to do your job. What if it was about having less stuff to do, less responsibility, less something? So, and how is it about creating a happier environment? So, yeah, going back to, I think storytelling is a bit of a lost art. I think everyone's gotten a bit like, oh, yeah, that's about how you give a presentation. But actually, it's about how do I get you to understand and hear me in a way that it's non-confrontational.
Oh, I love that. You know how much I love storytelling.
Yeah.
So recently I've been noticing something that's kind of surprising in my work. Mm-hmm. Very senior women, directors, heads of brand, leaders, building national footprints, hesitating to ask for budget for their own development. Oh. They, in conversations, the instant response to, if whatever it might be, a workshop or whatever, is that they're going to quietly pay for it themselves.
It happens a lot.
What's going on there?
It's kind. It's very kind, considerate, thoughtful. It's all these wonderful things. However, that's not what professional development is for. It's for you to be better at your job, be happier, be more comfortable, have what you need to do a better job and to stay.
And to contribute more value to the organisation.
Right. Yeah, not stay stuck, to stay here. So I see this all the time. I'm constantly having to say to female leaders, hey, this is professional development. Here's an email draft on how you can ask for that to be paid for. Go for it. And I love doing that, but I just wish we'd have a bit more of is this PD? Yeah, I think this is PD. And also going to lunch. Oh, my God. Going to lunch, if it's a business lunch, it is not just, I'm just skiving off and having lunch. I'm going to have a meeting with somebody. I'm going to a networking event to meet people who could open doors, who could do whatever.
Yep.
These are things that is what the business should be paying for, not you quietly taking money out of what your remuneration for your effort is supposed to be. So, yes, I would love if more women would ask for that to be through PD. And if blokes would say, hey, you're going to lunch on Friday, I see in your diary. I didn't see that come through expenses or whatnot. So just asking each other that question and looking around and seeing who's not hesitating on that.
And what's behind it? Is it a conviction issue? Is it a positioning issue? Or is there a belief? Like you said, kind, it's a kind thing to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of hoo-ha around PD budgets. In my experience, it was that. It was like, oh, no, there's never any money in PD. I won't even ask. And so we've got to be careful and catch ourselves when we say things like that. I won't even ask is a very loud indicator that, you should probably ask. So me having a conversation about, well, what is my PD budget for the next 12 months? What is it for my team? What is it for the business? What are we trying to achieve here aligned to the values and the purpose of the business? So we should be spending money to make more money because our people are happier and more comfortable and educated. So really cracking the lid on the conversation around where is the pot of money for PD.
Love that. Love that. And love it as a trigger for thinking, if you're immediately thinking that you're going to fund it, that should be a trigger. It's, okay, if a senior, and I'm asking this question because I do think it's predominantly in women, but if a senior male executive quietly self-funded his own development rather than positioning it strategically in the business, what would we think it says about him?
Ooh, it's a good question.
Would we think he's kind, or would we think, where's his conviction?
When you're talking there, what I thought straight away was that education must not be about the work that he does here. So that's what I think when people spend their own money on training. It's like, oh, okay, they don't want to use it here. That's interesting. So yeah, I don't necessarily go hard into, he's brush and bolshy versus he's not. I think that it's a case of what's the driver for doing that.
So can you give us an example? So if, just to make this real for someone, let's take an example. If someone wants to attend something, a leadership program, might be a few $100s or whatever it is, how should they structure that conversation with whoever they need to talk to, the budget holder? You know, what's the sort of structure that they would follow? What language should they use? How do they frame ROI? Can you give some sort of tips?
Yeah, I think, first of all, just going in, saying, look, I've looked at this program and I thought it would be really great. The impact I think it will have on my job is blah, 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 blah. What I need is a day of PD and for the business to fund the training. And full stop.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Don't say anything else.
Because what we'll find ourselves doing is negotiating with ourselves and saying, oh, I'm happy to pay half, or I'm happy to take it as annual leave, or I'm happy to whatever. It's like, no, stop. So really thinking about what is my ask? If I go and got everything I wanted, and then where's my fallback position? But start with that ask. And the same thing is going back to that. Is it reasonable? Yeah.
Yeah. And how might you bring the ripple effect in? How might you take your learnings and bring it through to others in the organisation? Should women simply ask more, or do systems need redesigning? And I'm opening the door for you here.
Yes, I think that it's both. I think there's an invitation. So I think anyone who is comfortable asking should look around and go, who isn't comfortable asking that works with me? And then I should get them to come with me and experience how I prepare, how I go through the experience, and then debrief, and then go, okay, next time you're going to do this.
I love that.
So, it's pretty straightforward how we change the system is not by being the one out the front that go, oh yeah, Sam loves that stuff. Put her out there. She loves that stuff. No. Yeah, put me out there come and stand right with me and have that conversation with me, and I'll back you. Don't worry. But if I just lead it all, that's fun for me, but it doesn't change your circumstances.
I love that, lifting others up. And I know you have an ambition in schools. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I never learnt this at all. I genuinely thought I must have been in detention the day they taught negotiation training at school.
I wonder if you were in detention a lot, Sam.
Yeah, a bit. So, yeah, look, I think if we can teach people, the curiosity element to being a child really diminishes as you turn 11. And the number of questions you ask deteriorates from something like 300 a day down to 30 very, very quickly. And so as adults, we need to be invited to be curious and maintain that. So what if we actually taught people the craft of negotiating or asking at school? And what is the impact of that at various stages of their lives? When we talk about the most important conversation around consent, being able to say no when I mean no and say yes when I mean yes. When you're thinking about, older teenagers, was it when they're in cars driving? How do I ask somebody to slow down? I don't feel comfortable. When I'm in, asking for my first job, this is what I'd like. I need a hand with blah, blah, blah. I need flexible time because I'm a carer, because I'm these things. So, and then so on and so forth throughout your entire life. And then when you're in the middle of your, important time in your career, you can have the confidence to have robust discussions, healthy debate, and then, pass that back down the chain and up again.
Because you've exercised the muscle.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And then everybody around is like, oh, it's okay to have debate. I don't think negotiating equals a fight. I want to change that. I want people to go, oh no, it's about conversation. I want to go and find out information, and that's okay. And I'm going to debate with you because guess what? Healthy debate brings better outcomes. So I did debate at school. It will not be surprising to you. And I really would love us to bring back that into the workplace as well, as to have healthy conversations and debate, because from, pressure comes diamonds. But
I love that idea, Sam, because, it's we're forming into, one group on one side of the line, another group on the other side of the line, the division, like this idea of healthy debates and discussions.
Yes.
Gosh, to find that.
Yeah. We have to force ourselves. I force my Instagram feed to listen to people I don't agree with because the algorithm is set to, keep to my bias. So how do I stay out of my bias? And that is by talking to different people that I don't necessarily agree with, finding things that I don't understand and leaning hard into them, because otherwise the social media construct and the AI world is not going to help us. So being curious on that.
That's so interesting. Okay, we're going to have to close it, but I want to ask you to fast forward to International Women's Day 2030. What could balanced scales look like in your ideal world?
I would love there just to be intergenerational conversation. I would like there to be open and honest debate about what people are worth, what they need to do to get to that place, that people are really comfortable being curious and stepping out of the fear and thinking about, okay, well, what's the cost to not asking? That's got to be greater than asking. And then all I need to focus on is how I go about asking.
Love that. Love that. Sam, I'd love you. First of all, thank you for coming on the show. I hope the listeners get the value out of this that I want them to. I think it's such an important skill that you are, passing on to people. And I know you've got a number of different ways that people can engage with you and can learn from you and upskill themselves. I'd love you to close out the show with, I don't know, maybe a call to action, like anything you'd like to share about your business, but perhaps also what is one ask every woman listening should make this year?
That's a lot.
I know, sorry.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. So one is learn more about yourself, so asking yourself the questions. And if you want a hand with that, we've got a free assessment on the website, so just pop over to thepowertoask.com and you'll find that. I think the second ask is that one I mentioned earlier is, am I being paid the same as the person, not paid, sorry, remunerated the same as the person beside me, because we shouldn't just be talking about money. It's more than that. And then just really being curious, going through the next couple of weeks of all of the rhetoric that is the International Women's Day, looking for all the really good stuff, the stuff that makes you go, oh, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to ask about that. And really taking those things and don't just sit in the cloud of amazing women. Women are amazing. It's actually, okay, how do I get the people around me to make it so that it's amazing for all of us? And that's going to be about unlocking the power to ask.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?